This show is sponsored by Sevi, answering all your commercial real estate needs. Sevi is the first commercial real estate company committed to the 4 C's: commercial real estate, community, content, and culture. Go visit Sevi at Sevi, SEVI, properties.com. Again, SeviProperties.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla. And today I have a very special guest for us. We have Cecilia Hodges. Cecilia is the regional president of M&T Bank, serving the greater Washington, D.C. and Virginia market. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Otto, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course, the pleasure is all mine. Before we go into your personal and business side of things, I'm sure the majority of the audience is here locally in the DMV area, and I'm sure they've heard of M&T Bank. But just in case there is that one individual out there, they're like, okay, I see the name bank. If you could just give us a brief general overview, what do you folks do there at M&T, please?
Sure. Well, M&T is actually the 11th largest bank in the country right now, but we think of ourselves as a community bank. So when you walk into any of our branches or you're dealing with any of our M&T colleagues, we want you to feel like you're dealing with your local neighbor, your community banker. However, we can offer the breadth of products and services of any of the larger banks in the country. So our footprint extends from Buffalo, New York, down the Mid-Atlantic to Richmond is as far south as we are with the retail presence. However, we have offices in Florida, and we also have our Wilmington Trust Wealth offices scattered around the country, as well as a few international locations. The roots of why the bank was established to help out local communities. We've remained committed to that throughout the history of the organization.
Yeah, that's great. I can't wait to get into how you even come about getting into banking and finance. But before that, are you originally from this area here, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area?
Well, I am from Virginia, but not from the greater Washington region. I grew up in a very small town called Rocky Mount, Virginia, which is near Roanoke. I grew up there. My parents still live there on Smith Mountain Lake. My family and I love to visit there. And I went to Virginia Tech. And after Virginia Tech, I was tired of small town living. I wanted to move to the big city and see what that was like for a while. So that's when I relocated to Northern Virginia right after college.
I see. How small of a town was it? A couple thousand in population or tens of thousands?
A few thousand in the
Okay.
town. There was one high school for the whole entire county, Franklin County, the high school that my parents went to, and still the only high school in the county. So my nieces graduated from there a few years ago. So it's a pretty small town.
Growing up there, I mean, if I can just briefly take you back there, as a child, if you can remember, what were you into? What other extracurricular activities besides school did you like?
Well, there weren't a lot of extracurricular activities. It was the country, trust me. The highlight of a Saturday night, there was a Dairy Queen in town,
Okay.
and all the teenagers would kind of cruise around the Dairy Queen parking lot was the activity on a Saturday night. And even to go to a movie, you had to go to the next largest town, which was Roanoke. So Roanoke had had one movie theater at the time, and there was a mall. So whenever you needed anything, you had to go to Roanoke to buy a dress for school, dance, or anything like that. But shortly after I left, we did get a Walmart, and now we have a couple of retail outlets. So we're growing
There
in
you
Rocky
go.
Mount.
Look at that. Maybe one day an M&T Bank branch, right? Who knows?
Hopefully so. That's my goal.
That's great. And then you said you went to Virginia Tech for college. What'd you major?
I majored in business management. So I'd like to say that I had a master plan to be a banker when I was in college, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I grew up in a family business. My parents own a building supply company in Rocky Mount and Roanoke. And of course, the hope of my family is that I would come back home after college and go into the family business because I had worked there throughout. Well, when you grow up in a family business, you work there from when you're a kid, right?
Hmm.
You're sweeping floors when you're at elementary school, and the older you get a little more responsibility. But I moved to the city and just took the first job I got, which happened to be in banking.
Are you the only siblings or do you have any siblings?
I have two siblings. I have a
Okay.
brother and a sister, and my brother is pretty much running the business now. My sister works in the business as well as my sister-in-law. And even though my parents are 84 years old now, they still go into work most days. They aren't as actively engaged as they were, but honestly, up until like around the last 5 years, they were fairly engaged in the business.
I love that. I don't think I'm ever going to stop working. I like to be active. I think if you're not actively either moving or working your mind, a lot of things happen not negatively, right?
I totally agree with that, and I think that's one of the reasons that they are still like right now we're dog sitting for them because they're off on a trip, and I think the fact that they didn't retire and just sit around but stayed engaged in the business and active with friends is the reason that they're still in the health that they enjoy today.
Great. So when you moved to this area right after college, you said you went right into banking. Was that just coincidence? I guess that was the offer, the opportunity at that time?
It was pure coincidence. I got a job working for a mortgage company, and it really didn't challenge me. I was there for a little bit less than a year, and my first job in banking, I took the metro to DC, and I got an offer for with Columbia First Bank, and I was super excited. I called my dad from a payphone in the metro station and said, "Dad, I was offered the job on the spot, and it's double the amount of money that I'm making right now." And I was super excited because back then my goal was I wanted to make as much money as I was old, and I was going to surpass that with this new job. So that was a pretty exciting day for me.
That's great. So with this new job, you said you were doing mortgages or you were doing mortgages previously?
Well, my first job in banking for Columbia First Bank, excuse me, I was hired to actually start a customer service department for them.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't have any type of customer service department. So myself and a manager formed a customer service department that customers would call into for anything they needed with their deposit accounts, loans, mortgages, things of that nature. So I did that for about a year until we got the department up and running. And that's when I made the move into commercial banking as a credit analyst. I spent a year or so as a credit analyst and then was promoted to a relationship manager, or we were called lenders back at that time, in the commercial real estate department. And I grew my career from there. But commercial real estate or real estate in general is was a perfect fit for me because I'd grown up in the building industry and had certainly visited tons of job sites with my dad, walking job sites, delivering materials to job sites, something I really liked. And when I went to college, actually, I almost became an architect because design is something that I've always been very interested in.
Oh, that's interesting. So I guess commercial real estate or the commercial lending part of it was a perfect fit for you then.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you started doing that with M&T or was that with
I started doing that with Columbia First Bank, and then in I guess 2000 and or 1996. Um, Columbia First Bank was acquired by First Union, and they laid off everybody in the commercial real estate group. And that's when it was a really pivotal decision point in my career. I had a lot of great customers. First Union wasn't really that interested in the commercial real estate business at the time. And I think I had 8 job offers from larger banks, smaller banks, all different types of banks. My customers had really done a great job connecting me with other organizations. And I chose the opportunity with Provident Bank because it was an opportunity to open a commercial real estate office in Virginia. And that was actually Provident Bank's first location in Virginia. There were no retail branches, no loan production offices. Um, I myself and another colleague opened the bank's first loan production office in the state of Virginia, and we grew it very quickly. And then shortly after that, Provident did an acquisition that got us a retail presence in the state of Virginia. And the rest they kind of say is history. You know, Provident was acquired by M&T in 2009. And at that time, I just transitioned. I was running commercial real estate for Provident Bank for the greater Washington region and Virginia at Richmond. and I transitioned doing the same thing for M&T Bank. And I was in commercial real estate with M&T until I was named regional president for the Richmond region a few years ago, and then was named regional president for Greater Washington and Richmond back about 5 years ago.
Oh, wow, interesting. So I didn't know, Cecilia, most of your background is in commercial real estate then.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Since that is what I do for a
I
living.
know, I
Yeah.
know.
Was your typical, you said you oversaw it. So you first started as originator of production, correct? When you first had to open that first office with a colleague you mentioned?
Yes, definitely. The goal at that point we started was zero. No loans, no deposits, nothing. So I was just a calling machine out calling on local builders and developers in the region trying to build a book of business for the bank. And we did that very quickly. And I'm really proud to say that a lot of those clients that I dealt with back then, opening that loan production office, are still clients today. M&T has a really strong reputation in commercial real estate. A lot of 30 plus year relationships, folks that have been with us for all this period of time. And we're really proud of that.
That's great. How easy or difficult it was back then as far as making those calls, like you said, to developers and establishing those relationships? Just because, as you know, a majority have already long established relationship with their lenders, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Particularly for the clients that we were hoping to deal with. It's not easy, and you have to certainly get accustomed to a lot of rejection. And it also back in those days, 30 years ago, it was particularly challenging for me because I was a woman, and real estate is a very back then was even more so than today, a very, very male dominated industry. So I would just make calls and got a few customers, and my very, very best source of business back then was clients who would introduce me to friends and tell them that I was smart and could do a great job for them. And I have a lot of clients that I can thank for the career that I built in commercial real estate because they were so generous in making introductions for me, and many of whom are still clients today.
So a lot of that business was actually referral business from the sounds of it.
Absolutely. Yes. Once we got the office up and running, a lot of the business was referral business from existing customers. You know, Folks that I'd done business with at Columbia first, most of those came over and followed me. And then, as I said, the clients were extremely generous in making referrals for me.
It is all about relationship. I agree with you 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then you said from the transition, then you oversaw the commercials, all the commercial in this area. And then a couple of years ago, when you became regional president for the market, right?
Right. When I became regional president, I then was responsible for the middle market line of business, which we call, CNI, commercial and industrial, lending to all different types of businesses, with kind of dotted line responsibility for all the other lines of business for the bank, whether it be the retail bank, the business bank, the consumer bank, as well as, marketing and all of the charitable activities that we do here in the region fall under the responsibility of the regional president at M&T.
And you've been now with M&T for majority of your career, right? Almost 30 years.
Absolutely, including the time at Provident Bank, since Provident was acquired by M&T. I just celebrated 29 years with the bank this January, which is kind
Congratulations.
of crazy. Well, kind of crazy in today's time, right?
You don't see that nowadays.
You don't see that nowadays. But what's interesting, you see that a lot at M&T. M&T is really a different place. We have a special culture with people that are very committed to our clients and each other. And our vision statement at the bank is to make a positive difference in people's lives. So we just happen to do that by being a bank, but it's really a great group of people. And I think the average tenure of everyone in the bank, from the top level executives down to the relationship bankers in our retail branches, is 10 years on average, which is really high in today's
It is high.
industry.
That's great. Wow. Did you know going in 29 years ago that this was going to happen? This was going to be the future? Did you I'm going to pick banking, finance, and this is going to be my career?
I had no idea. Once I got in commercial real estate, I knew that I wanted a career in banking and commercial real estate. It's something, as I said, that I grew up with and that I really had a love for. And fairly early on in my banking career, I knew because I was doing a lot of things on the side. Like I was really involved early in my career with the downtown JCs. I chaired a lot of projects for them. I was the president and chairman of that organization. The year that I was chairman, I chaired the National Cherry Blossom Festival Parade, which back at that time was 100% volunteer. And of course, a tremendous learning opportunity. I negotiated a television contract with NBC4 to televise that, just things I would have never done in my day job as a banker. And that's when I kind of set my sights on the fact that I really did want to be the president of a bank. And I remember telling my grandmother that, when I was in probably my mid 20s. And she said to me at the time, I remember sitting on the front porch swing, Cecilia, women can't be presidents of banks. I'm just sorry that she didn't live long enough to see it, because I really love the being regional president. Certainly, we're still extremely connected to customers, and are very involved in customer relationships. But it also gets you more involved in the community at large. We have a foundation. Each of our community bank regions is responsible for a foundation, working with local nonprofits, and really identifying needs of the community, local communities, and how we can make a positive impact on our local community. And that's something that's very near and dear to my heart. Beyond the business of banking is making sure that we're making a difference in the community.
Would you say, Cecilia, due to your charitable activities outside of banking, commercial lending at that time back then, was that the pivotal moment that sort of opened up your eyes of possibly becoming president one day?
I think it was. I think it was. And everyone that I mentor, I encourage them to pick a nonprofit that they have a passion for and get involved, because you develop a whole different set of leadership skills and working with the nonprofit than you will in your day job, where the folks that are reporting to you get a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
When you're working with a nonprofit, the volunteers and the organization don't have pay as motivate. You can't use that as motivation. You have to really get them excited and inspired with the work, and encourage a passion for what you're doing to motivate them to accomplish the mission. And it's a whole different set of leadership skills that I found incredibly valuable throughout my career. And I think most of the folks that I mentor, once they get involved in that, find that it's very valuable as well.
Speaking about mentees that you have throughout your long, illustrious banking career, have you had any mentors? And if so, what did you learn from them?
I've had lots of mentors. Early on, in particular, being a woman in commercial real estate was frustrating. I don't play golf. I don't drink. So I wasn't doing a lot of the traditional activities, hanging out on the golf course or and at happy hour. So I had to find different ways to connect. And a lot of the women that I connected with early on are all still my friends today. And we commiserated at the time how we felt we had to work 3 times as hard to really establish credibility in the industry. So I learned a lot about that from those women. And as I grew in my career, I think it's also really important to have mentors that aren't going to sugarcoat things, and they'll just tell it like it is. Sometimes you need a kick in the pants. You need outside perspective when you're going through something. You tend to get really caught up in it. You need to talk with someone who can give you the bigger picture perspective and really help you work your way through things. And, from everything from career advice to parenting advice. When you have a job that is more than full time and you have children, you want to, and particularly me, a type A personality, I want to excel at everything I do. And, just advice like, Cecilia, pick your spots. You don't have to be home at midnight making homemade cookies for the bake sale. Stop by the grocery store on the way home. That's something where you can check the box. It doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
to be perfect. So, mentors have just been incredibly valuable to me, both personally and professionally throughout my career.
You've said several times, and it's so true, Cecilia, how there's not a lot of women in banking and finance. And I'm sure it wasn't easy, especially back then, right? I know it's a little
Right.
different now, but it's still the majority, it's still pretty much the same. How was it for you, especially trying to in the beginning, trying to earn that business?
In the beginning, it was a little tough. As I said, I feel I was incredibly blessed because I had a lot of great clients
Hmm.
who helped me not only learn the business. I have one client who I said, taught me everything I know about MPDUs and affordable dwelling units and a lot of things in the real estate industry, particularly as I started to do some of the larger development projects. Um, but also that gave me advice on ways to build relationship, on ways to connect with clients, sales techniques, things of that nature, because women had to do it a little bit differently. As I said, I wasn't doing the things that most of the men at the time were doing to develop business, going out and playing golf or going to happy hour or going to a basketball game. I was a single woman, and I didn't think that it was appropriate for me to be doing things after hours with married clients. So I found different ways to connect. I did a lot of things with couples at the time. We might go to a concert at Wolf Trap or something where I would get to know, both. Usually, it was almost always, I would say 99% of the time, it was the male that was involved in commercial real estate. So we would go out with the husband and the wife. And that I think has also helped me tremendously because with a lot of my clients, I know the entire family. I know the wife, I know when their children were born. I'm now getting resumes from their children for jobs at the bank. We've hired a lot of them. So it really has been kind of cool that it's been more about just the relationship with the client, but in fact the relationship with the entire family.
I love that. I love the part, especially that you've found ways to have that connection and relationship with the client, you know, besides golf or going out for drinks or happy hour. Because similar to you, I don't play much golf. I typically don't drink much, but you have to find a way to connect.
Right. You have to find your own path. And that's another thing that I tell folks that I mentor. Be your authentic self. Don't I can't tell you how many times early on I was told by male colleagues, Cecilia, you have to learn how to play golf. You're never going to get anywhere in this business if you don't play golf. And you really need to come with us to happy hour sometime. So sometimes I would, when there was a big group going out. But I took golf lessons, and quite honestly it just really wasn't my thing, and it took a ton of time. So I just had to find my own path, and that's what I encourage other women or anyone that I mentor. Find your own path. Don't do something that you're not comfortable with, but you'll find your own way to become successful and make connections with people.
It's so true. It just reminds me the other day I received a text message from a client has a business here locally, a couple locations. He was like, "Hey, let's go play golf." I'm like, "I need something a little bit more faster pace." I'm like, "How about pickleball?" I'm like, "Let's do pickleball. I don't know how to play that well. Let's have fun." He's like, he's very big into golf, and he was like, "No, he's been
Uh-huh.
trying to get me to get lessons." I'm like, "I need." He's like, "We can walk the golf course. That'll be your thing." I'm like, "I need something more faster moving." But it's true. Just finding a way to,
Right.
yeah. You mentioned earlier as far as trying to do everything, with the cookies at midnight. Do you have a family of your own?
I do. My husband and I have a daughter who's now a freshman in high school, very social, and my son's a sophomore in college.
Okay.
So the early days of bake sales and things like that are beyond me, but we definitely still have a pretty busy schedule in our household.
Does he go to Virginia Tech or no?
My son did go to Virginia Tech. We were very proud of that. He went there as a freshman, and then he decided he was a biology major. He decided during that first year that he wanted to go into nursing.
Okay.
So he's back home this year taking a few core curriculum classes, and he's going to transfer into a nursing school next year.
That's great. How was it? I know it's very different from a man and a woman as far as having a career, but how is it for you as far as, your two children, your husband? Easy, difficult?
Well, my husband is fantastic. He has a lot more flexibility in his schedule than I do. So he does, carpools, and my daughter's doing crew now, so she has to be picked up at school at 3, taken to Georgetown, left, then picked up again at 6:30, and brought back home. So my husband takes care of all those types of transportation needs for the family, which is helpful. I take care of the master calendar, and there is still a tremendous amount of activity, and it's just changed a little bit with parties and school dances and sports activities and things of that nature. But we make a good team, and the kids are really good about working with us. And my family, quite honestly, comes to a lot of work functions with me. Thankfully, my husband, enjoys going to galas and things like that. And I try to bring my kids to as many M&T volunteer activities as I can get them to, because I think it's really important for them to see that we're volunteering and giving back. And I want them to grow up with that type of mindset. So our whole family gets involved in a lot of things that we do here at the bank.
That's great. I know you said your son is in healthcare, pursuing healthcare. Do you think maybe your daughter might end up choosing banking or finance or no?
That's a hard no.
So
We
no one
were
in the
home
family is going
together.
into banking.
No one in the family is going to banking. We were home together for almost 2 years during COVID when they were doing virtual learning. And they would get incredibly frustrated at me. We had a little system. I would hold up the stop sign when they would come into my door, and I would be on a meeting like, don't come in.
Sure.
And then they would start giving me signs like, we're hungry, mom, we need lunch. Uh, and they think that banking is very boring because all I do is I'm in meetings and I do deals. So I don't think either of them will end up being in banking. My son wants healthcare, and my daughter just wants to make a lot of money. Is what her desire is right now.
Okay.
So we'll
Maybe
see
maybe
where she
commercial real estate. Who knows? Maybe one of your clients, right?
maybe commercial real estate. I think she's a good talker, and
Okay.
and I was actually ill last year when I was receiving an award, and I had her do my acceptance speech. So I told her I think maybe she has a career as a newscaster.
Oh, okay. There you go. When you were doing lending, Cecilia, was there a specific, I don't know, product or let's say box did you like to work in? Maybe just new development or refinancing of first or second or lines, or was there something that was sort of your sweet spot that you just love working on?
Well, construction is
Okay.
something that I really love. When we opened the LPO back at Provident Bank, they wanted us to start with home builders. So for many many years, I had a very strong home builder business doing land acquisition, development, and construction. Um, in the last few years at M&T, we've been a big construction lender. We have a very strong desire right now for mini perm business here at the bank. So my team and I are very highly engaged in all aspects of commercial and residential real estate, from the home builder business and land acquisition development to permanent business. But because of my roots growing up in the building industry, I think construction is really where my love was.
How is the lending side of business currently? Because I know with the rates going up, obviously you felt it, correct?
We absolutely felt it. It's been a tough couple of years in commercial real estate just because of the economy, and obviously right now with everything going on in the market, everyone's concerned about the impacts of tariffs on the business, the impact in the local region of some of the job losses, what impact it's going to have on, say, the multifamily market, retail, some of the small businesses. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now. So in the greater Washington region, I feel like over the last few weeks, certainly month or so, a lot of commercial real estate developers are kind of on pause, waiting to see how current events kind of shake out.
Yeah, they're just on the sidelines there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've had such a rich, long banking career. What would you say you're most proud of thus far in your career?
The thing that I'm most proud of, it really is on the people side. Um, Seeing individuals that work for me and the folks that I'm mentoring grow and develop and progress in their career. It's really incredibly heartwarming for me to see someone that started as my admin or the receptionist has now gotten promoted multiple times and is a vice president for the organization and has really grown in their career. It's also very cool, and I'm sure you can appreciate this when you're in commercial real estate. I can drive all around the region and see neighborhoods that I finance. And you drive through and you see kids playing on the playground and living in the homes or the shopping centers that the parking lots are full. They're going to the grocery store, they're going to the neighborhood services. A lot of banking really is about creating communities where we all live, work, and play and helping individuals achieve their dreams, whether it be a family that's saving to put their kids through college, to pay for a wedding, to retire, and take that trip of a lifetime. That's a big part of what we do as bankers.
Yeah, that's so true. I have three boys of my own, and sometimes when I'm driving with my sons or one of them, I'm like, "Oh, look, this is one of my clients. Look, this property
Exactly.
there," and it's nice. And but for them, they don't care. They
They're
could care
not
less.
in real estate business with you.
They could care less. But it's nice to point it out to them, and who knows?
Who knows? Maybe they'll grow into it.
Yeah. You mentioned your team and mentoring your teams and how someone started here and now they may be a vice president or whatever position. How important is your team in surrounding yourself with the right people, putting them at the right seat in the bus?
That's 100% the most important thing, is having the right people around you and empowering them to learn and grow. And I think that's a really important skill for all leaders to learn is delegation and trust. And things aren't always going to be done perfectly or the way you would have done it, but that's an important part of learning. And I think that's how you build loyalty from a team. And we have an incredibly good, strong team here at M&T Bank. As I already said, a number of people that have been with the organization for a number of years. And while it's always really sad to see anyone leave, it's been really nice and rewarding to see that most of the people that leave the organization leave for a very large opportunity that isn't readily available here at the bank at the moment.
That's great. What advice, Cecilia, would you give to someone that was just starting off in banking today and they wanted to make a career out of it?
I think it's really important to work hard, be a little sponge, and soak up every bit of knowledge that you can get from the more senior people that are working with you. And it is really important early on to get not just a mentor, but multiple mentors. And I would say mentors within the organization as well as mentors outside the organization, because you want a really broad network. Um, you want diverse perspectives to help you think differently, think through all the options. And when you're faced with a problem, when you have a group of mentors with different backgrounds, you're going to get different answers and perspectives. And you kind of pull together all of that information and advice and the different perspectives, which has always throughout my career helped me make better decisions. So I think that's really important. And then I think you have to advocate for your. Obviously, you want your mentors to advocate for you, but you also have to advocate for yourself. Um, Once you have a goal in mind and you know what you want your next position to be, talk to your manager, talk to your mentors about that, and ask them how you can prepare for that next step. Maybe you need to take a class. Maybe you need to take some internal classes. Maybe you need to expand your network. Whatever it might be, really rely on those people to help you get prepared for the next step so that when an opportunity presents itself, you're ready.
I love that. That's great advice. For in regards to mentorship, I'm sure it's pretty self-explanatory. If you're in the organization, maybe there's the manager or director that your boss, you can maybe they can help you get mentored, or maybe a colleague who has more experience than you, right? But what about, outside of the organization, like you suggested? How can they go about maybe finding a mentor outside?
Well, I think you have to not be afraid to ask. I mentor a number of folks outside the organization, whether it be folks that work for clients, some CFOs that work for clients, some CEOs that run nonprofits. And in most all those cases, they just picked up the phone and called and said, in one case, I felt horrible. A CEO of a nonprofit was actually crying when she asked me. She said, I really look up to you. I want to, I know you're busy, but, I want to ask, would you be willing to mentor me? And it was an honor for me to do that. And we've had that relationship now for probably going on the last 3 years. So just pick up the phone or send a message. And if there's someone that you'd like to mentor you, just ask. And I would say almost always you'll probably get a yes. Or if the person is really overwhelmed and feels that they can't do it, they'll probably make a suggestion of someone that they think might be able to help.
Yeah, that's great advice. Or maybe just ask questions if you have a question. Maybe you don't specifically directly have to ask, "Would you be my mentor?" That's a commitment, right? Um,
Absolutely.
but maybe you have a question about your career or something, and maybe I'm missing something. What do you think, right? I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do that all the time. And sometimes I have a problem at work, an HR problem or something, and I'm really kind of struggling with it. And, I'll call some up outside the bank. Of course, I don't say names or positions or things, but I'll just, kind of frame the situation and say, I'm really struggling with the right thing to do here. What would you suggest? And again, getting an outside perspective coupled with folks I talk to internally, has really helped me throughout my career in making decisions.
Do you think there's any specific habits or traits or skills you have, Cecilia, that you think have helped you in your career, or maybe even just outside of your banking career, maybe just personally outside of it? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, I think leading with integrity is the absolute most important. And I got that from my dad, who has been my mentor from day one. I still talk to my parents every single day. He is probably the smartest and kindest business person that I know. Very, very high level of integrity. I think that's most important. We've already talked about being your authentic self, not trying to fit into anyone else's mold of what they think the expectation is to be successful, but creating your own path. Being adaptable, strategic, thinking through, I'm type A, and I tend to really think about things before I'll speak or act, sometimes to my detriment, because I think I overthink things sometimes. That's just kind of how I'm wired. But understanding when things change, that you have to be adaptable, and looking to your team and asking for their advice and suggestions on things is important. Multitasking is also, particularly in my current job, multitasking is extremely important because no day is the same. A lot of client things that we're dealing with, as well as maybe nonprofit things, working, trying to get a television ad, completed, just all different types of things. Having to keep a lot of balls in the air is really important as well. And really, relationships are super important. Dealing with people with empathy, always listening. You're not always going to agree, but it's really important that everyone feels heard. And almost always, when you speak with someone, um, there things from their point of view and perspective that can be incorporated into decisions that make it a better decision.
Yeah, that's great. What would you say is your biggest challenge with your role at M&T Bank for you today?
I think time, time management.
Not
There are
enough
a lot
time?
not enough time. So many things. The inbox. I was just talking to someone earlier today. The inbox. Trying. One of my weaknesses is I need to. I know I need to post more on LinkedIn and be more engaged in social media. And I was just complaining that by the time I get through the Outlook inbox, going to the LinkedIn inbox is really tough. I know I need to do it, but just finding the right time. And, I spending time with colleagues is important. Spending time with clients is important. And those are the parts of the job that I clearly enjoy most. So it's just being pulled in a lot of different directions and trying to set priorities and make sure that I'm focusing on the right things. Spending time with clients and colleagues and staying on top of the administrative task is probably definitely my biggest challenge.
I just thought about it. Is there something you like to do daily? That and the reason I'm thinking about it, when you said LinkedIn and having the time and you mentioned posting, it just made me think of, I don't know if you're familiar with John Gray. He's the president of Blackstone. And he started just like that, not having enough time. But now when he's
Mhm.
jogging and visiting his London office or Singapore or whatever he is in the world, he's jogging and he's sort of less than a minute talking about, I'm here with, he might be with another team member, a colleague, or just by himself. But I don't know. I just thought about it. Maybe just I'm having coffee. Here's my thoughts on whatever market.
Mhm. I need to think about that. I feel like it's very rare. The one time I tell my children that when I'm home and not at an event at night, I said, I just want to sit down and watch the national news for a few minutes. And inevitably, that's when one of them comes in and says, Hey, mom, did I tell you about it? Hey, mom, did you hear what grade I got? And I'm like, guys, what am I doing? Oh, I'm sorry. But of
Yeah.
course, I put it on pause and talk to my kids. Um, but yeah, that's the one thing that I do. I definitely admit to being a workaholic and work a lot of long hours.
Yeah, I understand. Coming to an end here soon, what do you know now that you wish you would have known at the start of your career?
Oh goodness, that's a great question. Probably being more of an advocate for myself. Um, you know, Growing up when I did, my expectation was if I worked hard, that that I would get noticed and rewarded for that. And I wasn't one to speak up, really saying what I wanted in terms of my next step. I just expected that it would happen. And I probably got clued into that by a mentor around mid career. And one of the things that's really cool for me today is the younger generation, the folks that we see coming into the organization today are very, very bold about what they want their career to be and what they want that timeline to be. And I think that's going to help them progress more quickly in their careers. And I think it's important that you have to, in addition to having mentors and allies in the workplace and telling them what your desires are, be really vocal and advocate for yourself as well.
That's so true. You know what I've noticed, Cecilia? I see that more often, and I could be completely wrong, more in women than men. Even just firsthand experience with my wife and her career. Sometimes I'm talking with
Hmm.
her at home, and I'm like, "No, you got this. You can do this. You have the experience. Like, why are you second guessing?" And I guess,
Right.
and I'm like, and and there's articles I've actually even read myself from like Harvard Business Review and everything, how a lot of time women and very different as far as their career, how they think with men. And sometimes men, we just don't think about it. Maybe we don't think we're ready, but we're like, let's just go. Let's go.
Absolutely. It's a huge issue for women. I was just speaking on a panel 2 weeks ago, and that was one of the things we were talking about. If there's a job and there are five requirements and a woman has four, she says, "Oh, geez, I'm not qualified. I don't know that fifth
Mm-hmm.
thing." And whereas a man, might have two of them, and he says, "I'm perfect for the job." There's a higher level of confidence, and that's one of the things that as women, I think we need to be more self confident in the fact that we're smart and capable and we can learn quickly. And I tell all my mentees that, and it's something that I've learned over time as well. And I think it's really important that women embrace that, and that we all continue to stay on each other about that, to have confidence.
Yeah, you need cheerleaders there for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We all have, setbacks in our career and life, failures, what would we want to call it that. Is there any specific setback that you can think of right now that you dealt with throughout your career, and would you do?
I feel I've been very blessed in my career with the connections and relationships that I've had. Probably the most devastating would be when I was at Columbia First Bank and they were acquired by First Union, and they, laid off everybody in the commercial real estate group. I was young in my career, just been promoted to a lender, and it's pretty scary to lose your job when you're single and you're your sole source of support. But as I said earlier in the conversation, I had a lot of great clients who immediately just started saying, call this person, call that person, and was fortunate to get a lot of job offers and made a transition fairly quickly. But I can really relate to that feeling of of losing a job and the fear that that creates. And that was probably one of the toughest times in my career.
Yeah. What does the next couple of years look like for you and M&T Bank? What are you most excited about?
Well, I'm super excited about this region for M&T Bank. We have a fairly small market share here in the region, but we have an incredibly talented team and just a lot of runway to grow. And when you look at the entire bank's footprint, we're very successful in terms of growth in all lines of business here in the region, just because of the strength and quality of the team we have out connecting with clients. So we're excited about our opportunities for growth here in the region, in all of our lines of business, as well as the work that we're doing in the community with a lot of our nonprofit partners and the difference we're going to be able to make in helping out some of our neighbors in need.
That's great. I know you're a workaholic. So when you're not busy working, the rare occasion, what do you like to do in your free time for fun?
I love to spend time with my family. We love going back to Rocky Mount and Smith Mountain Lake. My kids would rather go to Smith Mountain Lake than the beach, actually, because my
Really?
parents have water toys there.
Okay.
So we love going there. We love traveling as well, and that's what we usually do when we have some spare time.
Is your husband also from around that area or no?
No, my husband actually grew up in Paraguay,
Oh,
so
okay.
he's from South America.
Have you guys traveled often down there?
Um, my husband, yes, we go there usually once a year.
Oh, you do? Okay, that's great. I've never
Yes,
been to Paraguay, but it's definitely on my list.
yes, all of his family is still there, so we're still definitely connected to his family.
Speaking about traveling, do you already have traveling plans for the summer or not yet?
We are going to Punta Cana for spring break in a couple of weeks, and then my husband and the kids are going to Paraguay in August. I won't be going with them.
That's nice. How long are they going for to Paraguay?
2 weeks, so it's a little bit of a long trip.
It is. It is. I'm going with my the whole family. This is going to be their first time. We're taking them to Iceland and then we're going to Portugal for the summer.
Wow, that sounds
So
amazing.
we're looking
Yeah,
forward to that.
we haven't planned the big family trip this summer. It's complicated when you have two kids with two different schedules trying to line up all the sports commitments and things like that. So I've still got to try to get that figured out to plan our big family trip.
Yeah, I'm sure. If people want to learn more about M&T Bank and what you're doing there, where can they go to find more information, please?
Well, certainly mtb.com, our website, or pick up the phone, walk in and call any of our local bankers, or pick up the phone and call me. I'm happy to connect them with anyone in the bank. We love to meet new people, and whether it be individuals or companies, or if you're thinking about starting a business, we'd love to have a conversation with you about how to make that happen.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining me today, Cecilia. I had a great time.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Of course. Take care.
Thank you, Odo.